one simple purpose, which is to get students and the youth to talk about politics again without fear. Since last year, we've been going around the country, within a lot of universities to organize the student discussion tour. And traditionally, we would only have student leaders as our guests. But today is a special day because we have with us the Honorable Mr. Husam Musa, the Vice President of Amanah, and also the State Assemblyman of Salo in Kelantan. Next, we also have our Deputy President, Emily Wong, and our Discourse Manager, Sebastian, who will be representing the students. So, just an overview of this event. It is not like a typical political forum. It is more like an interactive discussion. So, to begin, we will have Mr. Husam to give his speech on G14, on Pakatan's preparation and manifestos, and then we will start off the discussion. So when we start off the discussion, it will be based on topics. If you have followed our page, we have specified the topics, and I'll be asking a lot of questions to Mr. Husam and our panelists. But in between, you are allowed to ask questions. And when you do ask questions, I would want to ask you to come closer to the camera so that the camera could capture your voice. You don't have to be in the camera, just come close to the camera. So, yes, let's not waste our time. I guess I shall invite Mr. Husam to give his opening speech.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Assalamualaikum. Thank you for this session, and I'm happy when our moderator is a youth. So I think my trips to London to get Malaysian youth to participate in next election can be benefited from his participation. So Malaysian election, general election coming very soon. At last, hopefully. Although there is skeptical rumors that election won't be held, but strong rumors saying that the election will be on 5th of May. On the 5th of May. So more or less another 2 months. But this election is very important for Malaysian as a whole, not for the politicians, not for us, you see, as a politicians, but for Malaysian, because Malaysia under Najib already journeyed into a trouble territory. So, as you know, corrupt practices in Malaysia already first in the world, second to none. We are already known as the biggest kleptocracy in the world, and it is non-stop, still expanding, and at the what's it called, expenses of the whole nation, our debt balloon, and that is a proud of Najib. He not just what's it called, accountable and feel shameful for this progress, but I think he also look proud with what he achieved. And furthermore, as you know, because of media is under control by Najib, in case of equanimity, everybody know that that is from stolen money, which few generations in future need to bear the balance. That is not the money they raise from what's it called, ordinary revenue from the government, but this money is from loan, from bond raised by Malaysian government. And today, Malaysians are still the biggest, what's it called, issuance of Islamic sukuk for the last 5 years, I think. We are the biggest sukuk issuance. And this money, which we get from loan, channel out to equanimity, part of it, 1 billion ringgit Malaysia. And yet, no official media cover this thing, this news. Only Tempo in Indonesia, and that been blasted by some minister from Malaysia. So, secara ringkas, kita akan menghadapi satu zaman yang lebih gelap. GST, for instance, nobody can guarantee that GST will stop at 6%. I think after election, it can easily goes up to 8% or 10%. So, you, the young generation, will suffer. Tun Mahathir, at his age of 93, I think he affordable to pay extra GST, isn't it? But for ordinary Malaysian, any extra rate of GST, terrible for them. So you need to come over together with us to stop all of this. First, if you cannot achieve anything good, but to stop the bad practices is achievement already. But of course, when these things are being stopped, we can start a new chapter. That's why this election is very important for us.
I see that. Thank you very much, Mr. Husam. Right, moving on is our interactive session. So I'm just going to give you the topics that we'll be discussing about. The first one will be on Dr. Mahathir as Pakatan Harapan's Prime Ministerial candidate. And then we'll talk about PAS and Amanah. And we'll move on to Undi Rosak and the manifesto of Pakatan Harapan. So to start off, just a ground rules for the audience. If you want to ask, make it short and concise. And please, please be polite if possible, and be straightforward. And sometimes I may need to keep you short, to keep your speech short. So I apologize in advance if I happen to stop you. Okay, now the first topic we'll be discussing about Dr. Mahathir as the Pakatan Harapan's PM candidate. Some were happy, some felt betrayed, and some don't know what to feel. So my question to you, Mr. Husam, why was Dr. Mahathir picked as the Prime Minister candidate ahead of the younger, the more potential politicians in Pakatan Harapan, such as Azmin, who's the Menteri Besar, or even Mukhris, who was a former Menteri Besar? So why Tun Mahathir?
Why not mention my name?
Oh yeah, Mr. Husam.
Okay. You see, in certain nations facing a trouble time, they need some elders to champion the change. For instance, in USSR, Russia before, Gorbachev came with what's it called, reform agenda. Before you have Russia right now, Deng Xiaoping in China did open door policy, and that to bring reform to China in some sense. Indonesia as well. We have what's it called, Habibie as transition president. So what I try to say is that regime change is not easy. So what's going to happen in Malaysia if UMNO and Barisan Nasional been defeated is a regime change. A regime change. That means 6 years of UMNO in power, which never been defeated before, will be defeated. But to get UMNO to be defeated, it's not easy. We already talking about this for the last 3 or 4 elections since Anwar Ibrahim was called lead opposition in 1999. So if you really want to achieve change in Malaysia, you need to have some leader like Dr. Mahathir in between to bring what's called conservative Malay rulers to cross over. And some worry is that Mahathir, who people allege is tends towards colonialism, tends towards more strong leadership. There is some worry, but I think the combination is different now. Before Dr. Mahathir leading hegemony of UMNO, but now we have a different team player in the team, and different leadership and different orientation altogether. So if you see speech of Tun Mahathir or our tawaran Pakatan Harapan, you see one thing. For instance, on the political reform, institutional reform, yeah, which already a pledge to the people. Yeah. So Dr. Mahathir cannot easily, when become Prime Minister again, to change it, because the composition of the MP, the composition of Parti to form the new government, and the promise already known to the people, and his age. You think how long he will last? Although in our manifesto, the Prime Minister limited to 2 terms, but I don't think he will finish complete 1 full term.
I see.
I think in his thinking, he just want to put a foundation for the new Malaysia with the current situation.
Okay.
So nothing wrong for the elder who got immunity like him to go against Najib. Okay? Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim already in prison. Tok Guru Ni Aziz already passed away. There is no great leader to unite the efforts to bring change in current Malaysian politics, except Tun Mahathir. And suddenly he crossed over. And of course, there is many vulnerability and wrong perception on him as well. But I think as a whole, if the change is really happened, he will reinvent Malaysia as his last contribution to the nation. And during his tenure as a Prime Minister, we can see clearly he brought many changes. But I think at that point of time, there is not enough good elements to support him. And some elements in UMNO took opportunity without his knowledge. And later on, that's happened. Let's say we take Putra Perwaja issue. At least Mahathir from Suranjaya to study on Putra Perwaja, and then brought to the court some of the people involved. But on one MDB, Najib refused to do the same. So if Tun Mahathir become a Prime Minister again for transition, I think this will open the door for everybody, young leaders to go up. Like in Indonesia, you cannot have Jokowi right now without Suharto step down. You cannot have President of China right now if Deng Xiaoping do not go for open door policy in China and Gorbachev in Russia. So I see Tun Mahathir from this positive perspective.
I see.
And moreover, because his age, if he young, so we need to worry.
So now that he's 90 something, it's
93 something, and he want to do his last contribution to the nation.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Husam. It's a nice, interesting answer from him. Now let's listen to the youth, what they have to say.
Please.
Sam and Emily, maybe Emily first.
Yeah.
Do you think we have, Pakatan Harapan has a better candidate than Tun Mahathir?
Well, in my personal opinion, from a very pragmatic point of view, if you look at the electoral base of Malaysia, the majority of the electoral base consists of people from middle age group. So yeah, pragmatically, I think he's the perfect candidate. But however, in my opinion, in a country where we want to support a parliamentary system, we should not be voting based on a single strong leader. Because with single strong leaders, as experienced in other countries, is that usually leads to authoritarianism. So we should vote for a party, I feel. That would be one.
What about you, sir?
I think as a Selangor resident myself, and as a self-avowed follower of the Pakatan Keadilan Party, I personally prefer Dato' Sri Azmin Ali to lead Pakatan Harapan to the next election, and I would definitely support him as Prime Minister. I think that Selangor has come a long way since Dato' Sri Azmin Ali has become the Menteri Besar of Selangor. I think that the quality of life, I think there's been new institutional reform to some extent, and in general, I think it is fair to say that Selangor is a much better state now under PKR leadership than it previously was under UMNO BN leadership. And given that Dato' Sri Azmin has, to some extent, the ability to unite most, if not all, factions of the opposition, the current Pakatan Harapan opposition coalition, so to speak, I think he'll make a good candidate. And I think most importantly, given that he's a member of the youth, he's relatively young. I think most politicians in Malaysia, unfortunately, aren't that young. But it's rare to see someone of a generation as opposed to Mahathir holding a position in the executive leadership of a state and doing relatively well in it. So I think I would support Azmi Ali for Prime Minister if I was.
Thank you. Interesting new answer.
Can I put some comment?
Okay, yes, of course.
We cannot just see Tun Mahathir as opposed to the younger leader of Pakatan only. We must see Tun Mahathir as opposed to Najib. Which one you prefer, Najib or Mahathir? If Mahathir within UMNO, I also rejected Mahathir. But within efforts to have a regime change between Mahathir and Najib, you must see which one you want to elect. You want to elect. You want to put Najib against as a prime minister of the next election. But if you put Tun Dr. Mahathir, Dato' Sri Azmin, I think probably he will be next or a future prime minister. But if Najib still there, no way for Azmin or Rafizi or Nurul or whoever to become a prime minister. I only will be a class in the prime minister's office. So you must see from this dynamism, is it? You cannot compare immediately someone with Dr. Mahathir in that sense. Of course, our voters compromise of the younger age, as mentioned just now. But right now, surprised me, the crowd puller and the selfie puller, not just crowd puller, selfie puller, is to Dr. Mahathir. So I don't know why. You see, the youth, among the youth, among the youth, if you follow to Dr. Mahathir, everywhere he go right now, for instance, like what's it called? Candidly, he go to the restaurant. The whole customers in that restaurant will give him a standing ovation. Everybody stand up. Everybody claps. Just for the simple reason, from my observation, because he really go against Najib bravely, uncompromisingly, and he is the only leader right now have capacity to hit Najib hard. I myself, I don't have that bravity. Okay, I spoke, but I cannot talk like Tun Mahathir talking about Najib as kleptokrat, as penyamun, as penyanga, as pencuri, as penjahat, as for what? Nobody among us can speak like Tun Dr. Mahathir. So that's why the younger generation appreciated his bravery. So of course, it needs some reservation and limitation. That is in the tawaran pakatan. And Tun Mahathir come to the terms willingly, and he spoke about reforms on AG's role. He spoke. Although under his tenure, he amended the constitution during crisis pelembagaan untuk raja-raja. But then now he do that. AG's power is so unlimited. So need a change, need a reform. So he himself spoke about that, not we imposed in his mouth. So before I know him, sorry, it'll take a longer time. I also thought that he is a strong leader, going to impose everything on everybody. But come to our series of meetings, he just stressed on one thing: the winnability of Pakatan, to finish Najib, to throw Barisan Nasional, how to coordinate efforts. And because of that, anonymously, he been named as a transition prime minister. Every party in Pakatan, the 4 party in Pakatan, no single party rejected him. All party from Pakatan willingly accept him, together with Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim. So, of course, Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim has a role in future. Datuk Seri Azmin, of course, is an ideal future leader. But time will come. If Najib finish, if Najib not finish, nobody have a chance, except they join UMNO back. That is a disaster to us.
Right, thank you. Is there any question from the floor?
I was told that you would have made a possible prime ministerial candidate, but you're not interested, or at least DPM. But your focus is mainly on Kelantan. Is that right? You would rather be MB of Kelantan?
I'm not that capable. The role as prime minister or deputy prime minister is a tough role. Kelantan accidentally, I think currently there is no promising leader who can bring change to Kelantan, whereas the people need that change. So I think as Kelantanese, better for me to focus on Kelantan. But we need favorable government at the federal. For instance, the payment of royalty, petroleum royalty, that needs a favorable government at the federal level. Without that money, we can develop Kelantan, but it's very tough. So, Tun Dr. Mahathir Elas agreed on that. And when we have dialogues in Terengganu, so he realized that what he changed from royalty to Wang Ehsan, already abused by a certain party. So do not achieve the objective to make it more efficient in terms of distribution, in terms of management of the fund. So in tawaran Pakatan, we agreed to pay royalty to Kelantan, Terengganu, Sabah and Sarawak, and also increase the royalty with the royalty. So I think if that happens, Kelantan also will achieve development which never achieved before. You as Kelantanese. Please.
I see. No, I mean regarding this Kelantan thing.
So I'm focusing to Kelantan.
Okay, so is there any chance that we'll be seeing you as the MB of Kelantan in the future?
They said because Tuanku already tarik my gelar Dato, so there is no more chance.
Still,
But we thought that which will later. So the more important is that for Pakatan to win in Kelantan. Okay.
I just want to touch a bit about Kelantan.
I'm not Encik.
Encik.
Us leaders call me Encik.
Just a bit about Kelantan. InVogue, if you know InVogue, came out with a report saying that PAS will lose Kelantan, and BN would
going to
win Kelantan back again. So what do you think about
that? Is I think last month.
Yeah, that's last month.
Yeah. So survey always following the progressive forward. So progressively, there is another 2 months.
I see.
So it can change. And if you go by last 12 months, what InVogue say? InVogue say, or not InVogue, Merdeka say, under Professor Ridwan.
Ihsan. Specific dari Ihsan.
Yeah.
Yeah, ID.
ID said Amanah just got 2% of support. Okay, but if you see the last 2 or 3 days crowd in Bachok, the biggest ever crowd after last election, only by Pakatan. If you go to PAS Cerama or PN Cerama, less than 100, less than 50. But our crowd, some say 15,000, some say 8,000. Malaysia Kini said 8,000. Strong crowd. So compared to last 12 months, 2%. Now, the biggest crowd, the whole peninsula. Conservatively, I say Pakatan already captured 35% out for the 3.5. So another 65% will be shared between UMNO and us. So I think we need just another 3% to become a government.
Any more questions? Thank you. From the students? Any questions on Tun Mahathir becoming the Prime Minister? Okay, Eunice?
Yeah, hi. I just want to know, is it like enough to choose the lesser between two evils? Is it enough for the country to move on? Like, just by picking Tun Dr. Mahathir instead of Najib, like, is it enough? Like, personally, I don't think it's enough. It looks grandiose, yeah, it does, but obviously it's grandiose for a person who has led the country for 20 years and to lead again. It is a big move for the country, but will it actually achieve the change that we want? Because I don't
Precisely correct, you see. I already mentioned that a combination of factors. So one of the combination is that the parties in the coalition. Okay. If you see the distribution of the seat to contest, it's quite square. So Amanah going to contest 27 seats, and PKR have a biggest seat allocation. So comes to the candidates. Who going to be a candidate for Pakatan? A strong candidate, a weak candidate, capable candidate, track record. So if this candidate line up by Pakatan is a strong, capable candidate, and they're going to win, so they will form the government. Not Tun Mahathir alone, they're going to form the government. And during our meeting, so we agreed to give a royal pardon to Anwar Ibrahim immediately after we formed the government. So Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim was eligible to recontest after general election to immediately become MP. And I think that in Sri Wan Aziza, or Datuk Sri Wan Aziza, I think temporarily she will become a deputy prime minister. But ultimately, mungkin Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim will be a new Deputy Prime Minister. So you will say that is still not enough. Who's going to be a minister? A minister is no more Ahmad Maslan, no more Nazri Aziz, no more Johari, no more Salih Kroa, no more. Rafizi will become a new minister. Okay? And if Datuk Seri Azmin want to join the cabinet, I think, of course, he will get a post in cabinet. I won't be a minister, but I will be a strong MP, hopefully, to check and balance the government, if that needs to be so. So some of us, not just mere MPs who are going to follow everything. We are critical MP supposed to be. And so we have a new landscape of Malaysian politics. Okay, you cannot see Mahathir per se and Mahathir alone. This is a change, and the structure, the institution will change either, because we already put into our premise as a coalition to go for change. So change is imminent, and Tun Dr. Mahathir will follow the agenda for change. Tun Mahathir cannot repeat Tun Mahathir as a president of UMNO as before. So get the whole bigger landscape of Malaysian politics with this change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, I hope that answers your question. Okay.
You can.
I wanted to ask Oily in terms of Pakatan promise abolishing some of the tax, GST for example, in the climate where the country is basically financially is quite bad. Scholarship are being reduced. The hospitals don't have enough budget. So where are you planning to get the funds from? And you're giving extra royalty to Kelantan, Terengganu, Sabah, and Sarawak. So it seems like the revenue for the country will be reduced. So where can we get the money to run the country from?
Good. Yeah. You must see this issue also in a comprehensive picture. The cannot stand alone on the establishment of GST, but you need to see also from the perspective of how to reduce unnecessary expenditure by the government. For instance, under Najib, he not just not eat rice, he go for quinoa to make him fit. Not just that, his taste, you see, not just quinoa, his taste, but ballooned budget under Jabatan Perdana Menteri, close to 20 billion under Jabatan Perdana Menteri. Whereas during Tun Dr. Mahathir, I think around 6 billion is enough for him. And Tun Mahathir delivered more what's called modern infrastructure, more economic plan, planned. But under Najib, he got a budget close to 20 billion. And so if we can reduce the government expenditure, some of course tiris kepada kroni-kroni, as you know from laporan audit, from everything, you see what's it called pembaziran. So we cut some of the government unnecessary expenditure, and then we increase the what's it called efficiency of jabatan hasil on kutipan cukai, jualan dan perkhidmatan yang baru. Before we got around I think 80 billion from cukai jualan, but some ketirisan, you see. And we got 44 billion from GST. So I think with the increase of efficiency by collection of tax, I think we will get around 22 billion, and we cut the unnecessary expenditure around, some estimate like Datuk Akbar Sattar head of what's it called, one of anti-corruption association. He estimated 20 billion what's it called kebocoran daripada bajet. So we will get enough money for that. And during the Tun Mahathir's time, the oil price per barrel just around $30 per barrel. But at that time, some scholarship still available for students. And although the price of petroleum decreased right now, but still around $60 per barrel. But yet, the country not enough money. So where the money goes? The money goes to what's it called? Their own pocket.
Okay, we'll discuss more on the manifesto later on.
Yeah.
So you can drink some water, but I have a bit of questions for these student leaders. I'm sure you talk a lot about politics with your friends, so we want to know what other youth are saying now that Tun Mahathir has been chosen as a candidate. Do you think that has turned off or make the youth to have no trust on the opposition? Do you think the youth will still vote for the opposition?
As well.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, the youth themselves have not actually lived through Dr. Mahathir's rule. So what we're living through right now is the legacy of what he has done. So I believe in the end, the most important thing that the youth are worried about. We're very pragmatic people. We want to live in a country where it's economically well developed. We want to have jobs, we want to have houses, we want to have cars. We are very pragmatic people. So in the end, we don't want a leader who cannot lead our country into that situation. So it doesn't really matter if it's Mahathir or someone else. In the end, we don't want to repeat any other. We don't want to live in a country that you can't live in.
It's correct. That is the parameters.
Sir?
So I think Pakistan made a very interesting trade-off when they chose Dr. Mahathir as Prime Minister candidate. I think they decided, or at least they calculated, that it was worth trading off the enthusiasm that the youth will have turning up in G14 for a safer and more experienced leader who Malaysia has experienced before in the past. They also calculated that he would be popular enough with the youth because he's now aligning himself with the more reformist aspect of Malaysian politics. I don't know whether this calculation will pay off, but I can't pretend to know exactly what the Malaysian youth think, but I think I've heard enough voices from both sides. Some say it's practical, some say it's pragmatic, but I think the youth in general tend to be pretty idealistic. They tend to want someone representing them and representing the country that they live in that also holds their values to heart. Whether or not that is Dr. Mahathir is up for discussion, because some people point to the alleged crony capitalism and alleged nepotism that took place during Dr. Mahathir's time as Prime Minister. Whether they'll be able to forgive and to look past that is, quite frankly, a decision that we'll find the answer to after the election ballots have been calculated. But I think generally, and I think you see this on social media, I think you see this in conversations with youth in universities and in colleges. Generally, you have two groups of people. Group one says Mahathir is necessary, and they see the necessity for the party to nominate someone who is popular in the heartlands in order to win over Putrajaya, because otherwise the opposition will just forever be the opposition. I think you also, however, have a second group of people who are very politically active and very politically informed and hold their values very strongly to heart. So these are members of the youth who are very, very reformist, and they're very liberal, they're very lefty. I think they're more reluctant to vote for Dr. Mahathir given his past track record. And I think they also want someone who's more able to bring about new change, not just a change in regime, as YB rightly pointed out. Because a vote for Dr. Mahathir, they say, is a vote for the old Malaysian politics, the way things were in the past, and not the way things should be in the future. And that's why a substantial group of people candidates such as, but not limited to, Dato Sri Azmin Ali are more ideal to lead the country because they are fresh faces, because they don't represent what Malaysia used to be, but rather new young leaders are more likely to represent what the country will become. And I think that's the discussion that goes on within the Malaysian youth. Whether or not it pays off and whether or not Harapan has calculated this correctly, I think we'll find out when the election results are announced.
But hopefully
Of course, hopefully we hope that Harapan wins.
actually you choose the first one.
Interesting opposing ideas.
Okay.
Okay, now let's move on to another interesting topic, which is PAS and Amanah. Now that PAS is no longer in the opposition, what is Amanah's role in the coalition? And what is the difference between PAS and Amanah? That's my question.
Yeah. The role of Amanah is to make sure the Pakatan coalitions continue to exist. So when PAS left Pakatan, the objective of PAS is to destroy the coalition. So by attacking DP and later on distance themselves from PKR, and hopefully the coalition is finished, and then that will make UMNO and Najib stay in power. That is the whole arrangement. At that point of time, I certainly convinced that PAS and UMNO strategies, which I think they work together, as per audio by the Abdo, who admitted that PAS faction defeated what they call Jabon, Anwarinas, and the Munafik hierarchies by the cooperation of UMNO, including the financial assistance. So the existing common committee strategies between UMNO and PAS, they never think that Amanah are going to be formed. So their objective to make sure PAS and UMNO can cooperate together and PAS destroy the coalition of opposition. But when Amanah been formed, that strategy is spoiled. Amanah was called work hard to make sure DEP, PKR, and later on Bersatu to form Pakatan Harapan right now, to have a credible and strong opposition against Barisan Nasional. So if you really want to go or change, you must appreciate Amanah's role. So what is different from between Amanah and PAS? I think you can judge yourself. Amanah uphold the spirit of multiracial society in Malaysian politics, whereas PAS lately go back to the what's it called, Malay base plus Islamic flavor. For instance, Hadi following Hishamuddin to hold Chris few times, and his Chris is longer than Hishamuddin's Chris. And not just that, is he used Chris to belakik during PAS convention, during PAS EGM. So in that sense, PAS look like more what's it called, a Malay than UMNO in that sense, is it? But I mean that PAS go back to the what's it called, Malay sentiment, rather than go to mainstream as a whole, as a multiracial country. So Amanah strengthened the multiracial approach with Islam as an essence. So dulu PAS ada PAS for all. Now, some sense PAS for Najib, yeah, in my observation. As far as Najib still remain as Prime Minister, would Malay supremacy will be contained. This is according to top leaders of past what's called think. So luckily we have Amanah, yeah, and as to praise Amanah during the SIP negotiations. I think our role is just to make sure coalition cooperate solidly to offer what's called a choice to Malaysian citizens. So our role more consolidation, more what's called as a partner which can put every party as a strong coalition.
Okay. If you don't mind, I have a follow-up question to you about the difference between PAS and Amanah.
Pardon?
I have a question about the difference between PAS and Amanah.
Yeah.
So I think among the youth, it is often said that Amanah is billed as more progressive than PAS. In an era of gender equality, do you think that Amanah offers a fundamentally different view of women's rights than PAS does? And if so, how?
In my thinking, I do not know Amanah. In terms of leadership, there is no difference between women and men. So as far as they have a merit, we don't mind to have a woman as a leader. So that's why you see how Datin Sri Wan Azizah been chosen as a Deputy Prime Minister, candidate for Pakatan. And before as a Chief Minister of Selangor. Datuk Sri Azmin came after that when PAS tried to create problems with Datuk Sri Wan Azizah candidacy. And you still remember how Hadi put a remarks on her. Okay? So that is the departure in terms of gender as your question.
Okay, just very quickly to follow that up. I understand that Amanah is very accepting of female leaders, and that's great. I think Malaysia needs more of that. But on a different level, on a policy level in Kelantan, because Kelantan is often known as ultra-conservative, it's very religious, and oftentimes it is said that gender equality is a problem in Kelantan. How does an Amanah government in Kelantan make Kelantan a more safe, progressive place for women?
For women.
The average woman on the ground, on a policy level.
Actually, in social life in Kelantan, women is not being marginalized. They took part aggressively in business, in outdoor activities. But in terms of leadership, right now, Kelantan not yet have a strong leaders, a lady. But for Amanah, for certainly we will put some strong candidates in coming election. And I won't name it right now. But for sure we will have a woman candidate on behalf of Amanah for the state election, inshallah. So, but not just that, not just to have a woman as a candidate. I already discussed with them. They need to play a more important role. Okay, for instance, in terms of post in ESCO. Normally, a post for ESCO for lady just for women affairs, for welfare. Okay. So how come they can grow? How come they will perform as a strong leader? So I already talked to them. You need to strive for bigger role and a bigger perspective on the delivery to the whole Kelantanese. Not just contained or confined to women. So hopefully they're going to win, and hopefully we will give them a bigger task, and hopefully next 5 years we can see our women government leaders in Kelantan perform differently from the conservative arrangement before.
Right. Thank you very much. That's a very good answer. I mean, I hope that happens. Right, just a little bit of background. I forgot to mention. For those who don't know, Mr. Husam was in PAS, and in PAS he was previously also the MP of Kubang Krian, right? Yeah. And State Assemblyman. He was also the exco of the Kelantan State Government. Yeah, just a background for you guys.
Sekarang hantu pada.
That was that. Yes. So any questions on the floor?
How will you empower women?
Pardon?
How will you empower women?
How
will you empower women? If you do win, if Pakatan does win, how will you empower women? Because sometimes the men hold the power and they do not allow the women their rights. Right now, all you ever hear about women is that you must wear the tudung, you must tutup your aurat, you tak boleh pakai seluar ketat. That is all you ever hear about women. And you must support polygamy. Will the men be able to give them their rights?
What do you suggest?
What do I suggest? I think the women should also voice out, but are they afraid? Are they themselves afraid? Are the Malay women afraid? Because I think they are. They're not allowed a voice.
Yeah, should rephrase the more detailed way, the questioning of empowering women. If you could.
I don't know, I'm not a politician.
This is nothing about politics. Empowerment not just about politics.
Women refuse to fight, but why? Somebody's got to speak to them. Why are they afraid to say something? When they take them off their kapchai and say, you've got to go home and change. Everybody keeps quiet. I don't hear the men say anything. I don't hear women say anything either. And then we have cases of incest, we have cases of sexual abuse, we have cases of, many, many things that involve women and their rights. And everybody just turns the other cheek.
So I guess, how would Pakatan Harapan empower women?
I think in the policy, I think that is come under the lima, not the lima trust, but the lima tumpuan utama pakatan something. I cannot recall it, but I think there is one special what's it called program under tawaran kepada wanita. But I think our tawaran is not static. You can suggest any improvement for our tawaran as far as we can uplift the livelihood of the citizen, including the women. In our tawaran, kita bagi 50 ringgit from the federal government for every suri rumah for their KWSP caruman, and 2% cut from her husband's salary. But I think it's not just confined to that. If you're talking about empowerment, so I'm open for any suggestion.
I see. Okay, all right. Any more question on PAS and Amanah?
Sorry.
Yes.
Why do you think that Amanah should replace PAS in Kelantan government?
We not say that we supposed to replace them, but come to election, people need to choose a new party. So what is the parameters for them to choose any party during the election? So if PAS claim Amanah berdosa because Amanah want to tumbangkan kerajaan PAS, that is wrong. When election come, no more previous government. Everybody go to the peti undi to choose a new government. So tak ada yang tumbang. Semua sekarang free for all. Okay, people should choose based on first, I think, what's it called, delivery. What they already delivered for the last 5 years.
I mean,
And then performance. So what is their performance for the last 5 years? And then on the leadership, what kind of leadership they provide for the last 5 years? And then their future plan. What is their future plan for the next 5 years? But for the ruling party, you cannot just go to the public and say, this is my future plan. Because you already in the government for the last 5 years. You should continue the plan you already executed. So, so Kelantanis should know. Then my what's it called, sad feeling every time is about the damage on the forestry, on the environment, on the forestry, on the streams, the small streams, the flora and fauna, because of the massive logging activities. And these activities is different from previous activities before, either during Barisan National time or during Tuguruni Aziz. That is, before they just go for ordinary logging. That means certain what's it called, timber been logged, certain measurement of timber been logged. But this time around, they go for massive clearing of the forest for plantation. Officially, more than 200,000 hectares been cleared. So, the streams, the soil, the hills, the environment, the ecology, the flora and fauna, the animals, the orchids, the wild plants finish forever. And that really happened. So, is it this what we call as membangun bersama Islam? If you go to China, even in the barren desert in Ningxia, you see, they put what's it called irrigation system, and they start grow forests. In China, ruled by communists. In Kelantan, ruled by Islamic Party, who claim Wira Khalifah di atas muka bumi to take care of the universe. But what happened? So, and today you see what happened to what's it called, peniaga in Pasir Putih. I think you should follow the what's it called in YouTube. Yeah, they sent what's it called pegawai tongkat kuasa to chase the peniaga, and the peniaga came out and shouted at them. So, what? This is near to election, very close to election, another 2 months, and they're going to get people to choose to what's it called, vote for them. Yet, for certain reason, yeah, unknown reason for some, but I think I know the reason. The reason is the developer want to have that land, that what's it called, prime land, to make sure they can own that land and later on to develop that land. And I think they scared if the government change, the whole arrangement will be changed. So before election, although that is close to election, you're supposed to create a feel-good factor to the people. Yet they try to chase the peniaga out of that pasar. So you think people affected going to vote for PAS again? Naturally, they will vote for non-PAS. Yeah, please.
Could you speak louder?
Oh.
Yeah. Maybe you can stand up so that, yeah.
The logging in Kelantan is not excessive because Jabatan Perhutanan Negara said that the amount of area logged by the Kelantan government does not exceed what Jabatan Perhutanan permit.
You are confused. I'm in the government.
Which
You are confused. Okay, the confusion is here. The quota for ordinary logging is 4,500 hectares per annum. Okay, that is stated. But what happened? What happened is that they gave concession for plantation in the forest reserve, and they go for total clearing. What you're talking about just now is about ordinary logging. Still remain 4,500 hectares. Clearing the forest is outside of this regulation. That's why the numbers came to 200,000 hectares. And go and check for yourself. You Google it. You take a flight, what was it called, Asia, Firefly or Malindo during daytime, and you see from Gomusang around left and right, you will see clearly the forest is finished. So this is much what's called obvious than equanimity. If equanimity already was called arrested by Indonesian government, yet Malaysian government said nothing to do with us. This is ordinary ship. So macam itulah juga dengan penghapusan hutan di Kelantan.
Alright, sorry,
Okay,
you have to.
you can continue.
Okay. Maybe last one, yeah? Make it short and concise.
Why didn't Jabatan Hutanan take action to the Kelantan government if something is wrong?
There's
I
nothing
mean,
wrong. Practically, there is nothing wrong.
Oh.
You can clear the whole state. Nothing wrong. Because you, on paper, that is still hutan simpan. They never exclude that area as hutan simpan. That's why they call it reforestation. The term is reforestation. What is the kind of trees or plants categorized as what's it called, reforestation? Rubber tree. They call it TLC, timber latex exclude. Okay, rubber considered as hutan, pokok hutan. Yeah. So they eligible to plant with rubber, but that is secondary. The primary objective is to cut the tree and get the money out of that timber. So they call it bagi hutan miskin. Yeah, hutan miskin. What is categorized as hutan miskin? When they cut the trees, the timber produced from this area is so huge. It's nothing about hutan miskin. This is nothing to do as a poor forest. This is a rich forest. And they cut everything. So you can debate between. But I'm talking from my skill and what's it called? I really study that things. I have really have the number. So I really what's it called? Menghayati this issue.
I see. All right. Okay. Last few questions on PAS and Amanah. Anyone from maybe the panel?
I think we don't need to discuss at length on PAS and Amanah.
Okay. Maybe let's.
I think by time PAS will be obsolete. Hopefully.
Why doesn't PAS or the ulama or the muftis or the ustads mention anything about rasuah? Because in zaman Nabi, Sirah Nabi.
Why you ask me? I'm not PAS member.
I mean, what perhaps.
Can you
Perhaps
I also
you
ask the
have
same.
ideas.
See, I also ask the same question.
Yeah, they never
Why
say
not?
anything about
They
rasuah.
obviously fighting for corruption, on corruption. In Kutubah, that's raised by Tun Mahathir already. Ulama kita feel sorry for that. They concentrate on Fardu Ain, on the what's it called personal duty, personal religious duty, rather than what's it called common religious duty. You see? what's it called, collective religious duty. So that they stress on that. And of course, you talk about khutbah. I never satisfied with khutbah because khutbah is just like one version of Biro Tata Negara, reading about Merdeka Day, about Wilayah Persekutuan Day, about Nyamu Aedes, about we go this good citizen, must obey the ruler of what's called the government of the day. So, if Pakatan win, we should liberate Myanmar, to my understanding. Only then you can liberate the Muslim Ummah in Malaysia, at least.
Okay.
So I'm happy to say this in London rather than in Kubang Krian.
Alright, okay, we're done with PAS and Amanah. And we've talked about Tun Mahathir, we've talked about PAS also. Now we want to talk about Undi Rosak. I mean, these two are the two of the strong elements why the youth movement now going towards Undi Rosak.
What is the benefit of Undi Rosak?
Okay, so that's what I want to ask you. What is your
I'm asking
opinion?
you.
Okay,
What is the benefit of Undi Rosak?
I don't see the benefit.
I'm not still in power.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, what is your opinion on Undi Rosak?
I think you no need to discuss that. The answer is obvious. If you go for Undi Rosak, then I'm not still in power. So might as well you only for UMNO.
Alright. Okay, that is the view of youth, but in the circle of the youth, the youth circle, they have a very different view. Some are quite strong. So I want to ask this two students, student leaders. Yeah, let's start with Sebastian. What do you think about Undi Rosak?
I think the youth are angry. I think for far too long we've had politicians who obviously more UMNO than Harapan, but Harapan hasn't been given much of a chance really. We've had people who are disconnected. We've had people who pretended to know what our interests are, and they don't. And the policies, we've been left behind. I think the youth has been left behind for far too long. I think the reason why Undi Rosak is relevant today is because, partially because of the nomination of Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. So the two groups of people I spoke about earlier, I think the people who hold on to their principles and are genuinely frustrated at the government, they aren't very pragmatic. They are more values-driven and they are more principle-driven than they are pragmatic, at least. So they're upset. They don't see a good candidate in either party. And even though their local representatives are perhaps youths themselves, they know that at the end of the day, the person who they would be beholden to politically is Tun Dr. Mahathir. And that's why the Undi Rosak movement has gained and garnered more traction than it previously has. But I just want to be clear on this issue. Like, my personal stance on voting in general is that you should have the right to not vote for either candidate proposed by major political parties. You should have the right to choose, or rather to not choose either party, but yet still cast a vote. You should be able to vote neither, as most, or at least some European countries do in their elections, rather than have to settle for one of two options that, as a youth, I would consider perhaps bad or inadequate. And that's where Undi Rosak is coming from. But that being said, I think there are greater issues that this election and greater nuances that YB has also rightly pointed out that we can't ignore anymore. If Pakatan Harapan loses this election, democracy as we know it is finished. If we lose this election, it is more likely than not that the power and the promise that the youth want to see in Malaysia will not be delivered. So I understand why they're doing it. I just think that's perhaps not the right thing to do at this point in time in this election, because this only works in mature democracies where turnout is likely to be higher, for example, and this only works in greater democracies where not voting against a kleptocratic government is a feasible option. And in G14, it's not a feasible option. So in principle, I agree with where they're coming from. I agree that you should have the right to go to a voting station, participate in the democratic process by registering and by casting a vote. but by spoiling that vote at the same time, so in protest against the quality of the candidates available to you. In principle, I support this. I just don't think we're privileged enough to choose in Malaysia right now, because we don't have that freedom, we don't have that luxury of being able to choose between a good candidate, supposedly, and a bad one. Because right now it's clear choice. If you don't choose the lesser of the two evils, the greater evil will leave you frozen out in Malaysian democracy and make the country far worse than it has ever been. So there's no choice here. Don't spoil your vote.
What about you, Amanah?
I mean, I think Sebastian has said mostly what I wanted to say, but I think that's the thing though, that is that disillusionment that caused Rosa to become so popular, is the idea that, you know, the options available to us is not good enough, and that's why not just go there, participate politically, and spoil your vote, show a voice in that way. However, you have to also be pragmatic to know that, like, yes, spoiling your vote can, you know, decrease the validity of election results. But in the end, who's the one counting the results? And who's the one who's going to come out and question, like, oh, look, a large percentage of your voters voted to spoil the vote and to vote for none of love. Well, who's the one who's going to come in and do that? And unless there's international involvement, I don't see that being a pragmatic option.
I just want to very quickly add to that. I want to note that the Undi Rosak movement is prevalent only in more liberal and more urban cities. These are cities where the leaders on the ground are youthful. These are cities where the young candidates that we speak of, so for example in Selangor you have Dato Sri Azmin Ali. In Subang Jaya you have YB Henayo, who's doing a great job. You have youthful leaders who currently occupy these positions. If the Undi Rosak movement takes off in these like more liberal and urban areas, the people who will be harmed are the very people who Undi Rosak wants to see more of. So these are youth leaders. These are youthful leaders. These are people who they want more representation of in their state legislative assemblies and parliament. So when you spoil your vote, you're harming the people who you want to empower. You're harming the leaders right now, the youthful leaders who just don't have large enough clout and like don't have a large enough voice because they're still, you know, youthful and they're still relatively inexperienced as when they're lined up against like political heavyweights. So when you spoil your vote, you harm the people who you want to empower. When you spoil your vote, you regress sort of the idea that youthful representation is important. Because when large political parties see that these candidates are not doing well because they've either failed to turn out voters or their majorities are slimmer, it's more likely than not that these people are, you know, less likely to stand in the seats that they stood previously. And it's less likely that you give them the political traction that they need to move forward with governance and like to move forward with legislative agendas. So not voting for them may as well be a vote against them. And that just goes against the heart of voting in general as a young member of society. Because we want more policies that benefit us. And we have to look at a bigger picture. I think that's what I'm saying. Because if we don't vote for a leader, although admittedly beholden to someone greater, then the comparative is we lose what we have right now. And that could really well happen. So don't spoil your vote.
Okay.
I just feel like, can I just comment on that? I don't think you could come up to someone and tell them to do what they want at the voting station. The idea that like you should not spoil your vote, I say that you should go to the voting station and do what you think is best for yourself and the country. So I believe that it beats you sitting at home and not voting than you going to the polling station to spoil your vote. Political participation is what matters. So you know, if you're so disillusioned, you just refuse to vote. I say, you know what? If you're so disillusioned, go there and vote for nothing about.
I just wanted to show
It's
you how
Yeah, yeah.
Undi Rosak is quite a big movement. I mean, like it's quite influential among the youth. So,
But I think they do not really what's it called, comprehend the danger of the current government to stay in power. I just take example on the loan, government loan, the debt, which was called increased tremendously under Najib, and part of that bit misuse. So I take the report by PAC. I think the page 19, if I'm not mistaken, that the first bond issued by one MDB, valued 5 billion ringgit. $1 billion of that channeled to Gulstam. 1 or 2 weeks or a few weeks after that. You see.
Few days.
And
Few days.
few days after that, first tranche is 700 million USD transferred to Gustav, belong to what's it called, Jolu, Prince Jolu, and then I think that loan up to 2030 something. So who's going to pay for that? Not me, alone. Yeah? The one who spoiled their boats will pay for that. And how the government under Najib will pay for that in future? I think for sure he will raise the GST. So come again, not me alone to pay the increased GST rate. All Malaysians will pay for it. And yet, no what was it called clear economic plan for the benefit of youth as well. So you need to consider the danger to put this government to stay in power more than anything else.
Right, thank you. Okay, any questions from the floor, from the audience on Undi Rosak, especially the students, the youth? Okay, yes.
One little point. Youthful disillusioned would-be voters should be wary because Najib and Amanah are hiring the same election advisors who supported Donald Trump in the recent election. And what they're telling him is that Donald Trump largely won because of the young disillusioned voters who either didn't vote or spoiled their votes. And they're telling Najib that this should be encouraged because UMNO fears the young voter and they are actively working to exploit that disillusionment. And I'd like to let you think about that as you go to the next election.
Thank you very much. Very insightful. Any questions? Last question maybe for Undi Rosak? Okay, yes.
I think it's very interesting because the discussion that we have been having so far is very consequentialist in nature. You know, you shouldn't spoil your votes because of the consequence, because UMNO or BN will remain in power. That is right, but I think it's partly right. What's also important to acknowledge is the fact that election is a platform where you make a decision, and one can also make a decision based on principles, not just because of the consequences. So, for me personally, I think as someone who will be voting for the first time, my principle is that there has to be a threshold for a party to receive my votes. The threshold must be met. So the discussion should not be consequentialist, and it shouldn't also be relative. So you compare the lesser of two evils. I think that's right, but you know, when it comes to principles, regardless of whatever the other parties have to offer, I think the particular party we're talking about, they have to meet the threshold. And clearly, it's right to say that, you know, the opposition, Pakatan Harapan or whatever they are, this movement was born because you guys have failed to meet the threshold. That's my view. So maybe you have a feedback.
Yeah, I think as a senior in age, I think you need to go parallel between principles and consequences. You cannot separate it. If you go for principles, you can compromise on corrupt leaders who corrupt the whole country, and you want to give him a chance for another 5 years. And if Najib win this time around, I think he will be a prime minister as long as he wish. So is it principally centered in that sense? I see parallels between the what's it called principles and consequences. So we talk about consequences because based on the main principles, the overall principles. So if you can compromise with the corrupts, so I have nothing to say. Okay, but if you not compromise with the corrupts, first to finish the corruption, and then we have a chance. Either the new government will go corrupt again or not. But I think, as I explained before, at least you finish the corrupt practices, which is beyond our imagination. You see, beyond our imagination, and that corrupt practices burden not just on you. That is my biggest consideration on my cucu for next at least 50 years on the payment of loan. You see, so please consider what is your real principles.
I also want to take a chance to respond to that. So I see where you're coming from. I just fundamentally disagree with the idea that principles hold more weight than the outcomes at times. Like I said earlier, I recognize the principle that everyone has the right to cast their own vote in any way they like. I just think that there are too many systemic factors at play to, arbitrarily impose a threshold for a party to meet, especially in Malaysia, where our democracy is relatively young, and I'm saying this kindly. I think it's important also to note that incumbency advantage is a thing, and if you don't cast your vote, it is more likely than not that the incumbent candidate in where you come from will win. And presumably you don't like that incumbent very much, and that's probably why you are spoiling your vote, perhaps. I think that withdrawal from democracy, given that the government essentially serves each and every one of us, is harmful. And the reason why I say that is because you want to, at the very least, choose a government that will work for you and that will spend your tax dollars, which you don't have a choice whether to opt into or not, wisely. So even if this means choosing between a perceived bad government and a slightly less bad, but still in your opinion, bad government, at the very least, one of them is more likely to do better things with the taxes that you will pay either way, and the country that you will perhaps live in either way, than the other. And that's why I personally will be voting for Harapan. But then again, I understand where you're coming from. I just think that, I think we assign different weight to pragmatism and principle. I think that both are important, but one's more important than the other. You clearly, see principles being more important than pragmatism, and that's totally fine.
Can I also say something on that? I do believe that you should vote based on your principles, and if you want to go spoil your vote, that's really your own choice and your democratic right to do. But you must also note the fact that, can Malaysia really take into account spoil votes? Will your spoil vote be a wasted vote in the end? And I believe these are questions that should come into your decision based on your principles when you go in that voting station. But you do what you want.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
if it's at all possible, can I just request 1 or 2 minutes to voice out one last point?
Okay, of course. Sure.
I think we have addressed that angle, but just a slightly different point I wish to make is a point of accountability, because for me, a mature and a healthy democracy is one that makes sure all political players are held accountable. Not just the ruling party, but also the opposition. Everyone has to be held accountable. Voting for the opposition is, in a sense, a way of holding the current government accountable for their behavior. But how do you hold the opposition accountable? So I think in that sense, I would argue spoiling the votes, voting for neither is, reasonably it can be argued to be a way through which you hold the opposition accountable.
Okay. We take your point.
All right, thank you very much. That's quite good. Now we move on. Okay.
Sorry, I just want to say something. Malaysia, in terms of politics, is still immature. We are still very immature in terms of politics. And with Undi Rosa, there is no way for us because to improve, to go for a new sort of political. The main thing I think is to break the hegemony. So we need to defeat BN. We need to defeat Najib. Only after then, with the new government, which Malaysia has never experienced a government other than BN. That's only the time that we can achieve the new.
I think I appreciate his thinking. At this point of time, we welcome the message by this group, but eventually, hopefully, they compromise and they will come to terms. So we don't need to discuss. We appreciate the thinking. They want to teach something, but the election, they know not a classroom. Today you can teach a lesson, and tomorrow you can start a new class. You need to have another 5 years, and the government will stabilize everything. So you go for spoil of votes again, and I think we won't achieve anything. But that's okay. For time being, let us deliberating this thing. So we not stop here. Yeah.
One last thing to say about accountability. So I think you touched on something very interesting when you say that there's no way to hold the opposition party accountable. But I would argue in the context of Malaysia that the opposition party is already being held accountable by the ruling coalition. Because I think the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, to some extent at the very least, can appear allegedly partisan in its persecution perhaps and its investigations into politicians. I agree, this is good. We need to weed out corruption regardless of which side you're on. But it just looks right now that one side is getting a little bit more scrutiny than the other. That's accountability right there. And it's being perpetuated by they're supposedly independent, but perhaps, practically there might be a different story.
I think he meant with the accountability is about choosing the Prime Minister's candidate, choosing the candidate. But when they go to Parti Undi, I think they will rethink again. Because some seat, they can see clearly between the opposition candidate and the Barisan Nasional candidate. If you go to a seat like Ahmad Maslan contest, I don't think you're going to choose Ahmad Maslan rather than Pakatan candidate. So practically later, I think they will come to terms. But right now, let them express whatever they think are good.
Fair enough.
Right. Now moving on to the what's in it for the youth. We discussed on the manifesto and the systemic issues. You have answered.
Unfortunately, I'm not youth anymore. So
Yeah.
I think it's open for you to suggest.
Yeah.
You design what country you want to live.
Yes. Also,
Okay.
yeah. So
You participate actively.
Mhm.
So if you want yourself to be a candidate, we are open for that. And I think most of our candidates will be a young generation.
Okay.
I don't know other states, but for Kelantan, I cook myself the future candidate for Pakatan, for Amanah especially, a young leaders with a dynamic, thinking and look forward for a new generation. So I'm just intermediary between the young leaders and I have little experience to some on governing, so I will coach them and then they will take over. But if youth themselves thinking to get to the back, I feel sad about that, isn't it? Because you will continue live in this country. Kalau Tun Mahathir, I think 5 tahun lagi pun dia dah tak kuat kan. Myself, I don't know. But if you yourself not designed for your own future, who else? So janji dalam manifesto is good, but the whole design also important.
Okay. One question on behalf of the youth. Now many people complain about the systemic issues in Malaysia, right? So if Pakatan becomes government, what are
In Kelantan.
no
In Malaysia.
in Malaysia, yeah. What are what's for sure that you will do to our system? Like you yourself said that AG is too powerful, and then we know that the parliament is not as sovereign as it should be. So these are the kind of systemic issues that we have. So yeah, when you become government, what's for sure that will happen and will change?
For the youth or
For the system,
for the system? Okay.
which will be benefited by the youth.
I'd like to have a what's it called, a kind of first, the Prime Minister can be what's it called, we can pass a motion in Parliament to what's it called, I forgot the terms.
Very confident.
Yeah.
Very confident.
Vote of no confidence. That is a special terms. I cannot recall right now. What's it called? Impeach them. Yeah. Impeach him. Yeah. Impeach him. So in current system, we cannot impeach Prime Minister. So when we cannot impeach him, how clearly he bluffed the nation, he's still in power. And then we never have a what's called a special Parliament Commission. Okay, let's say on one MDB, on Felda, we're supposed to have a special Parliament Commission. And what's it called, in the state level, like Kelantan, we have a PEC at the state level, you see. But PEC is so weak. PEC don't have an accountant by themselves. So how are they going to study the issues and what's it called, to investigate? So we need to strengthen the PEC's institution at federal and state level by empowering them, by giving them facilities and staff and officers to carry their duty. So many things we can reinvent in a new government. But if you still with this government, you stay with this government, I don't think we need to think about to reinvent the government. So come back to the youth. How to empower the young generation. I think ordinary youth right now, they've been deprived the opportunity to develop their career. To develop their career, because if the government give assistance, they marginalize whoever not support them. You see, for instance, if they identify these people, these groups, is non-supportive to the government, they deprive from any assistance, any aids. So this kind of practice must be abolished in order for the youth to strive and to develop their career excellently.
Okay, all right, thank you. Now, question for the youth. Just a bit of highlights of Pakatan's manifesto. The first few things that we see that garnered a lot of attention was abolishment of tolls and GST, free tertiary education. And there are more than that. So I want to ask you, what do you think about the manifesto by Pakatan Harapan?
Well, in my opinion, if you want to spend that much money as a government, you would have, the money has to come from somewhere, and that money will either come from increased taxes, or, yeah, as theoretically as you have mentioned, through reshuffling or making the government, the institutions more efficient in terms of corruption losses and leakages. So I think it's very ambitious, and it can be good for a developing nation and with institutions, state institutions that are not strong enough yet. So,
Sebastian.
I think broadly speaking, this is one of the more it's a progressive budget. I think that's one way to put it. Obviously, I have questions about individual policies. So, for example, we need an increased minimum wage, but we also have a federalized minimum wage. So, for example, I don't know whether 1,500 ringgit, which is the proposed amount, in Kuala Lumpur, and 1,500 ringgit in perhaps Rawang, is necessary. I think that's what I'm saying. I think some things perhaps should be left to the states where possible. Sometimes they're not possible. But I think obviously broadly individual policies aside, this is a very youth-centric budget because a lot of the things cater to the younger generation, the millennials of Malaysia. So, for example, when it was announced that the Harapan government intends to make screening of the Barclays Premier League free and accessible, I found that very interesting. I personally, I think you see a common direction. I think that's what I'm getting at. You have a common direction where most of these policies are very specifically targeted at members of the youth. Whether or not that is a good thing, I think is a discussion that requires individual policies to be presented and to be debated. But the budget in general, pretty youth-centric, I'd say. Although, again, to what extent it is pragmatic, I'm not necessarily sure. I echo what Emily said. I think most of these items proposed in the budget sound very expensive. I'm unsure as to whether or not we'll be able to scale back on national debt since we are spending more money and pumping just a slightly less amount, but still a large amount of money into the country. So the size of the government stays the same, and the role that it plays is equally as large as before.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll open to the floor, especially the students, the youth. Do you have any questions regarding the manifesto of Pakatan Harapan?
I can speak again.
Oh yeah, sure.
I think one of my major concerns when I look at the proposed policies, the proposed policy ideas put forward by the manifesto, Pakatan Harapan's manifesto, is a remarkable failure to address the biggest challenges of the future. I mean, of course, it's good to have free education, you know, and the goodies for the youth. But more importantly, there has to be a clear attempt to address the biggest challenges of the future. Nobody speaks about, if I'm not mistaken, nobody speaks about the challenge of industrial revolution, about artificial intelligence, automation. There is no clear, specific direction or specific defining feature in that will address these challenges. Unlike the attempt by the current government to issue this idea of transformasi nasional 50 and then addressing policy ideas to cater to the challenges of tomorrow. So, what's your thought on that?
To me?
Who's this?
Any of the participants?
Okay,
I thought I'm going to address a little bit different. You see, China is a model. Okay? China is a model, and you compare China before Deng Xiaoping's open door policy. I'm quite familiar with China. So before that, commonly in China, even they will use the pencil up to the very end of, and the budget for the government department is very insufficient. And then how they develop the economy. So we can learn from that model. It's too short for me. The time is too short for me to explain in details. But by new economic development and policy and progress, the nation will get more revenue. And by structuring the tax alone, the government can get more revenue. For instance, in our economic history, people went to Singapore before, even to buy T-shirt, the watch, radio transistors, even apples and oranges. Kelantanis went to Singapore to buy carpet, to buy apples, to buy lychees, because at that point of time we put heavy tax on imports goods, and then we abolished that import tax. What happened? we collected more revenue from sales tax. Okay, that is just a modest sample. How creative restructuring of things can increase the revenue. But unless we come to power, okay, we cannot have the whole idea right now. But for sure, if the objective is to cut the expenditure, to increase the revenue, and the objective is to spur economic development, including what you mentioned just now, to address the future challenge. That's why when I talk about youth just now, I'm more stressed on the entrepreneurship development rather than the ordinary program. And then I think we can achieve that. Dato Sri Najib go on the policy of high income. Okay, but I think Pakatan through our tawaran will go for high quality of life rather than on paper high income policy. So the gist of our tawaran is to put things back in order, and once the government and the nation on the right tracks, they will go for that target later. If the nation right now on the last track, and the compass is totally lost, we don't know where the nation going for. Yeah, no clear destination. So totally on the wrong track for me. And I think from the result of the survey is also saying like that, the nation is already on the last track. So to put back the nation on the right tracks is first requirements, and progress will come later. Thank you.
All right, Sebastian, you want to say something?
Yeah, so I think Pakatan Harapan implicitly recognizes that times are changing and that automation is becoming an issue. Maybe they're not giving it as much explicit attention as you would prefer, and I agree with that. But I think throughout the manifesto, you'd probably notice a lot of things which require some thought and some analysis before one would realize that the outcome that they strive to achieve is an outcome geared to protect Malaysians in the fourth industrial revolution. Let's look at some of them, right? So I think by returning spending to universities, by making education free, they're empowering youth to take on jobs that are more likely to be protected from the industrial revolution. So for example, they are less likely to be things like Uber drivers in an era of self-driving cars, because they can aspire to do jobs and take on technical skills which machines, as of now, can't yet compete with. Pakatan Harapan further says things like slashing immigration, which helps blue-collar people and blue-collar workers in Malaysia to be able to compete in a world where there's already competition for their jobs by machines. I think they also say a bunch of other things. They also say that, for example, they cut taxes so that the middle class in Malaysia is more able to unleash their economic prosperity and to unleash economic growth for the country, so that they won't get left behind in an era of globalization and in an era of the fourth industrial revolution. But you're right. To some extent, maybe they don't have enough nuance and have enough color to their policies as you might like. But bear in mind also they've had less resources to work with. I recognize that I sound like I'm campaigning for them right now, but you know what? That's all right. I think to a large extent, we need to recognize that one party has a lot more time, a lot more resources, and a lot more outreach than the other. And I really, frankly, don't think that the party as a whole, like the coalition as a whole, has left out the issue. Even if they have, I think individual members of parliament, individual state assembly men and women are doing something about this. So for example, if you go to YB Wong Chen's website, you'll see him uploading specifically videos and infographics regarding automation. I think the issue is present. I think people will quite frankly be foolish to not recognize it, especially our policymakers. And they have, to large extents. But not perhaps, I think perhaps more could be done to make the issue a broad policy to be adopted by the coalition instead of just individual MPs. I probably agree. But the information is there. I just think that to a large extent, it's just finding that information, which is a little bit difficult. If anything, I'd probably say that the analysis is a lot better than analysis available like by UMNO-BN, just saying. But, you know, go check that out perhaps.
Okay, before we wrap up, can we have two more questions from the floor? Yeah, can we have Mr. Sebastian?
That's a very quick comment to this young gentleman's point that PKR or the Harapan does not have any idea, not speaking about information technology and science. This is where sometimes information is important. And I can say you're absolutely wrong, because I had spent last year and this year, I spent about 4 to 6 hours chatting with someone who was employed by the Selangor government. And his job was to help startups and so on into information technology. So you have a PKR government at the state level initiating this, and I think that is a good trend, and in fact was quite ambitious. The second point is you give those who are only Rosa spend a lot of time talking about, the age of Mahathir. And so Hitler was a young man when he started politics. That didn't do much good to the world. And I asked I spoke to two groups. I'm only a political observer, ex-Malaysian. And there's some reason why ex-Malaysian, because Singapore was part of Malaysia. And I spoke to two groups of youth who were very strong on Undi Rosa. And I asked them one question. What policy do you want the opposition front to implement? They were blank. And I threw out the question, have you thought about the housing problem facing urban youth and so on? They have not even thought about those things, which I suggested to them, do find out more about housing and how the opposition could implement. I managed to read through some of the manifesto, and one of the points which caught my attention was an ambitious housing plan to build 1 million houses. I'm not sure whether that's very ambitious, but I'm very glad that would benefit urban youth, which is a big problem in urban and suburban. So while I was a youth before, in fact I was president of the Singapore University Student Union, that's why I'm here today. And while we argue against the incumbent, or even incumbent within the opposition, I think stress more on policies rather than age. But I said interest, I'm no longer young.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gary.
Just a quick follow-up to the YB's perspective on the pursuit of a high-quality life. So being an observer of political discussions on social media, I think there's a significant block of individuals that believe that Bumi-Purak religious and rights are the policy of the past. I'm just wondering, what does YB think, or is there a specific stance that Pakatan Harapan takes, assuming they take over the government?
On Bumi-Purak.
Right.
Personally, I think basic necessity is not just confined to race. Everybody, the government is supposed to support equal opportunity on basic necessity to everybody. Talking about housing, previously the Selangor state government has the policy sewa dan beli. Okay, sewa dan beli. But after some time, that policy been abolished. More orientation on private sector to make a huge profit on housing development. I think we can restart again that policy. So, for instance, housing in Kelantan, there is a pocket of Chinese community in Kelantan. What we dream is that everybody have their comfortable house. You cannot say because you are a Chinese, you cannot have a nice house in Kelantan. And that is one of the economic program in China which made China rich. Again, I don't have a privilege of time to talk on that. But by housing alone, China created a huge wealth for their community. So, but yet, the community have a what's it called ability to buy. And you're talking about China as a what's it called communist what's it called system. But yet, today, they empowered the community to have their own house and able to buy their house. And the house is designed for human being. How they define human being? The housing area need to have a landscape, need to have a social and community facilities. They are more advanced than us, which claim as Islam, Wasatiyah, or whatsoever. So, by that policy, Malaysia will progressing more. I already talked on this topic, I think, last 10 or 15 years on Indian community. To me, the most deprived, the most marginalized. Okay? If you see what's it called, IT expert in the US, came from India. So nothing wrong with their mind. The wrong is about policy. So if Indian, Malaysian achieve excellent what's it called level of profession, that will benefit Malaysia as a whole. Okay, so I think through Pakatan, we have strong multiracial orientation on their policy that will bring more progress to Malaysia.
Is there a plan for orang asli?
So said orang asli in my state, membangun bersama Islam, confronted by the government, and the government accused them with so many wild accusations, whereas their condition is so poor, so marginalized, even to the water supply. Okay, before water supply come out from the very clean, what's it called, streams, and come the loggers with the blessing of the government, destroy everything. And what the reply of the government in the state assembly? Okay, sekarang tak payah pakai air sungai lah, pakai air pipe. But where is the air pipe is? Okay, so in my opinion, as Pakatan Harapan Chairman for Kelantan, we suggested one orang asli to become candidate for Pakatan, especially in the Galas state seat. Hopefully, they can voice their what's it called struggles in the state assembly, and we already identified some of them, very capable young leaders to represent orang asli.
And also the schooling, because
Yeah.
that is a big issue.
Pardon?
The schools, orang asli schools, because you have a lot of them.
The schools, there is some arguments, orang asli pergi sekolah lompat balik pagar apa semua, but we can address later. I think the economic condition of orang asli is not permissible for them to change. Yeah.
I want to ask a question on a broader scale regarding the election. How many
This is the last.
Yeah, this will be the last question. Yeah.
The boundary delineation is going to almost amount to design to make sure the ruling party stays in power, regardless of representation of popular votes.
Sempadan baru.
Yeah. So my concern that it may not only it may result in a situation of, let's say, like in America, the number may be different. In Malaysia, may, let's say, the 35% popular votes, but still government in power. My concern is that
in the process, most of the perceived urban non-Malay votes are put into opposition, right? And my concern is that not only it devalues the votes, it also negates the votes of the non-Malay voters in a area whereby most of the non-Malays are being concentrated into a larger constituency.
Okay, this Persempadanan Baru to me designed based on the premise of Malay majority will support supremacy of Malay leadership through UMNO, and non-Malays and urban people will go for opposition. So they designed that Sempadan Baru based on that premise. Okay, so realize this thing. What we supposed to do? We supposed to get more Malay votes for us. Okay, so come the mixture of the things like the Mahathir's role, Bersatu's role, single logo, and tawaran and everything, and the candidates itself. And to me, although Najib relies so much on that Persempadanan Baru, till there is rumors after this thing accomplished, only the election will call. But to me, with the current progress in Malaysia right now, especially in Peninsula, the Malay already moved to us. So neutralize their strategy. So how far that neutralize their strategy is how big the Malay move towards Pakatan Harapan. So you need to address them more, you need to engage with them more, and you need to cater them more, subject that there is no change what we already got before. When come the idea of Undi Rosak, that will spoil everything. So the Undi Rosak movement need to think twice on their approach. So as far as the Malay move towards a position bigger than expected by Najib, so the Persempadanan Baru give no effect.
Which means by design or by default, there is
by default.
Situation of
By default.
fight among the Malays and rather than fight among the Malaysians.
Pardon?
I mean, by default, by design, it's almost amounting to a fight among the Malays rather than fight among Malaysians. So my concern is that the non-Chinese will feel that what's the purpose of me going for vote, knowing that finally it doesn't make any difference to the overall outcome.
We need to tell the Chinese community if they consistently support us with the increase of the Malay support, we will achieve our objective, our goals. So the thing is moved right now, moving. So dulu we can say Malay is quite scared towards the EP, towards Chinese domination in their mind, perception. See? But I think with the current situation right now, every single citizen in Malaysia suffer, regardless of they are Malay or Chinese or Indian. So they are collectively suffer. So they don't mind to go for change, subject that their fear of Chinese domination, of the EP domination, of so and so addressed correctly.
Okay, alright, thank you. So to wrap up, we'll have Sebastian on behalf of the student to give some closing statement on for the youth.
Right, so I think as a member of the youth, Malaysia's at a crossroads. This is a very important election for all of us. I think it's important because the Malaysian dream is at stake. Most of us want to land secure employment. We want to own the houses that we live in. We want to have a safe and stable economy and a safe and stable society. We also want to be able to provide for our families in the future. And that's the Malaysian dream. But the Malaysian dream is under threat because inflation, because unemployment are plaguing our country. for far too long, like unemployment statistics, which aren't necessarily reflective of the youth struggle in Malaysia, have been used by the current government to demonstrate economic progress. But it's not economic progress if it's only targeted at the 1%. It's not economic progress if more rich people can buy more BMWs and fresh graduates are still looking for work and are still unable to find employment. And so that is why this election is very important. Because if we don't show up and vote in this election, Pakatan Harapan is less likely to win either by larger majorities or to win more seats in the federal parliament. And that is why I think it's very important for all of us to know what's at stake here. Because if we lose this election, if UMNO BN continues to win and Najib stays in power, Malaysia will continue to go down the same rabbit hole that it's been falling ever since he came to office. And I think that's something that we can't live with. And I don't think that's something that we can afford to stand by and be blinded to. Because unless you plan on migrating out of Malaysia, please don't. But unless you plan on migrating out of Malaysia, we're all in this together. We're all going to face the same consequences because it's our country, and we're all going to have to live with the national debt that is increased. We're all going to have to live with an increasingly polarized country by race and by religion, and we're all going to have to live with increasing levels of unemployment among the youth, particularly as jobs become harder to find in the Industrial Revolution. So I hope that the youth vote. I hope that you make the right decision, whatever that decision is. That's subjective, that's individual. But I vote for Pakatan Harapan. I hope you do too.
Thank you. Husam, do you have anything to say for the youth who's with us and who's watching online?
The remark by Sebastian is perfect.
Okay. Alright, so that's all for today. Thank you very much, Mr. Husam, Emily, and Sebastian. Just to make it clear, MPUK is strongly against Undi Rosak, and we always believe that at this juncture especially, we have to choose a side. So for the youth, my friends, please register if you haven't. We don't know when the election is, but just do what we can. And there are a growing concern that even if we vote, it won't make any difference. There will be a difference if you start making more effort. Maybe you can volunteer to help out, or volunteer in terms of money. So there are many roles to play if you want change. And yes, that's all for today from us. Thank you very much for coming. Good night.